that while Canada and the United States have had our differences over the centuries, we have always worked and eventually worked through them because we share values and our common interests run deep. Canada Strong will help make America great again.
That's a phrase that's going to resonate coming from Prime Minister Mark Carney as he makes the case for a new Canada-U.S. partnership. The Prime Minister was in New York today, highlighting all the ways the countries can work together to make both countries stronger. And this speech seems to be being received well. As U.S. Ambassador to Canada, Pete Huckster writes, Prime Minister Carney said something worth repeating today. A Canada Strong will help make America great again. I think a lot of Americans can get behind that kind of positive message. Meanwhile, Canada-U.S. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc prepares for his own trip south of the border. A date has not been set yet, but he'll be heading to D.C. for talks ahead of the review of the three-way trade deal with Mexico.
I'm optimistic that we have a path forward over the next number of weeks leading up to July 1st that's active and constructive, but the actual outcomes from the United States administration are something that they'll have to speak to. Trying to determine what's imminent in Mr. Trump's administration and what tomorrow and next week looks like isn't perhaps the most helpful thing, because recent history will show us that in some cases it's hard to get precise timelines.
And as the government pushes for better relationships abroad, here at home it's up against a fracturing one as Alberta moves ahead with a vote on whether to have a binding referendum on separating from Canada. Our reporter roundtable is here to talk about all of this, and there's a whole lot more we could discuss. Aaron Weary is here. He is a senior writer with CBC Politics. Mia Rabson is the Deputy Parliamentary Bureau Chief at the Canadian Press, and back from his vacation is Joël Denis Bellavance. He is the Parliamentary Bureau Chief for La Presse. Good to see you all.
Hello.
Good to see you.
JD, let's start with you. What did you make of what the Prime Minister had to say in New York, including using the phrase, make America great again, which is caught some attention?
Yeah, it did. And in fact, Pierre Poilievre used that in the House of Commons to respond to his speech. It may not be the most politically astute line to use because he's actually campaigning in Canada against MAGA, wanting to make Canada less dependent on the United States. That means make Canada stronger and not more dependent on the United States. But it comes at a time, as you alluded to with the interview you had with Dominic LeBlanc, as the time when Mr. LeBlanc is heading to Washington. Maybe he's preparing some goodwill reception from Mr. Trump and his administration for Mr. Dominic LeBlanc. Maybe he's preparing the groundwork for the discussions. But in a way, Mr. Carney is also right in saying that if Canada is stronger, the United States will benefit from that. As a stronger partner, it will make the United States stronger. But in the comments, he also raised a few interesting issues, namely that if the United States wants to produce more aluminum, they'll need more electricity. At the time when they're trying to use electricity to support AI centers, it does not work. It's going to cost them more. It's going to make the product more costly. So why don't use Canada's aluminum? Same thing with steel and other industries. So he was also pleading at the same time, make sure that you buy from us, but don't impose tariffs on us. So, and the crowd also is interesting because many of the people who were probably in that room support Mr. Trump. So that's a message I think that we should not forget.
Yes, maybe on New York City, yes and no, but yes, the business community.
The big pockets.
Yeah. No, I take your point. But Mia, it seemed like even with the "Make America Great" thing that some people have seized on, he seemed to be the Prime Minister making the point that the agenda Canada is pursuing is not a threat to the United States, right? It shouldn't be an affront. It can be a compliment to you. The question is whether you can sort of thread that needle on both sides of the border.
I think one of the things he was trying to do is show a position of strength. We know that the U.S. president tends to respond better to strength. If he sees weakness, he will simply just try to exploit that weakness. And it's something that Canada is trying to show, is like, we are strong. We also are trying to sort of send this message of, okay, well, you don't really need us. We'll find someone else to dance with. So it is a delicate balance. I think the U.S. ambassador's response is probably the most positive response I have seen from the U.S. ambassador about a Canadian...
About anything. Really, since he showed up.
I mean, no, but it's true.
Been a tense relationship.
It's been very tense, and I haven't seen him say a lot of positive things. So the choice of using that "Make America Great Again" may not resonate here very well. It's probably going to send a lot of Canadian eyebrows up because a lot of people on this side of the border sort of hear that phrase and might, shudder a little bit. But it clearly is resonating, and that was the audience that he was saying it for, and seems off the cuff to have sort of gotten the response that he wanted. There were a lot of important people in that room, and he had a lot of other meetings while he was in, some pretty big U.S. business leaders, and those are the people that he's comfortable talking to. They generally know him, so he's making the Canadian case. And he has to balance it, but I think a lot of Canadians understand the message he's sending there is mostly aimed at the White House.
Yeah, and Aaron, he talked about proposals on aluminum, on automobiles, and critical minerals, sort of laying out what could be some of the key foundations of the post-rupture Canada-U.S. relationships. What do you make of what we heard from Carney?
I think at first it reminds me of actually the initial tone that Justin Trudeau took, which was. Donald Trump is promising a golden age in America. We can be part of that. We can, trade with Canada. We'll help you get to that golden age. It's just that then things went off the tracks with tariffs. So I think it's a bit of getting back to that message, but I think it's also still in keeping with what Carney himself has said. And I think the challenge Carney has is that he's sort of presenting not two different ideas, but two ideas that don't necessarily sit beside each other easily. One is we've gone through a rupture and we need to diversify our trading partners. The other is Canada and the United States need a new security and economic partnership. And if you only listen to the first message, you think, well, that means we don't need any kind of partnership with America. Right. And if you only listen to the second message, you think, well, then the rupture hasn't happened. And I think he's trying to do the two things at the same time. And I think as a communications exercise, it's challenging. And then I think the real question comes once this actually kind of gets used into practical terms, what does it look like? What are the balances? What are the trade-offs? What are you doing to do the first thing while doing the second thing? But I think that what you saw today in some of the reaction is the communications challenge. I think this was a message directed at Americans at the White House, but I don't know, to JD's point, I don't know how Canadians will hear it.
Yeah, this is the challenge, JD, and I don't say this as to be pejorative, but the Prime Minister's problem here is that he thinks in very complex sentences and paragraphs, right? And that you need to kind of read it all. And often in our business, we reduce it down to a sound bite or to a single thing. But there's a logical thread through the start and the end of the speech. You just need to really pay attention to it all. And that's kind of not the way modern communication works.
Yeah, that's right. So a small tweet does not, transmit the essence of his speech. But Mr. Carney was using language that Donald Trump understands. He was using his language.
When he was talking about the Thucydides problem and how you deal with China and the asymmetrical order, was it that part? No. Okay, not that part. All right.
Make America great again. So he understands that concept. So I'm sure he got Mr. Trump's attention. And to get Mr. Trump's attention is very difficult these days. Over the last few months, he's been waging a war in Iran, trying to get the Detroit of Hormuz open again.
He wouldn't even go to his son's wedding. He was so busy.
Exactly. So
he golfed, though.
That's right. But to get his attention is tough. And we're arriving at a point where discussions on CUSMA needs to start, it needs to get going between Canada and the United States. It is going between Mexico and the United States because there are more issues to resolve between those two countries. We will need to get at a table at some point, and the issues remain the same for Canada. Take off the tariffs on our steel, on our aluminum, on lumber, on the auto sector, so we can, start a relationship that is based on trust and respect again. Yeah. So that's part of the argument. But clearly, Mr. Carney was trying to get Mr. Trump's attention by using the language he understands, and I think that was his purpose today. And also, remember, he was in New York also for another mission. Try to bring investments
capital
in Canada.
Yeah, and that was the argument, the stable, reliable partner that can work with America because it's American money. But, Mia, on JD's point of getting the attention, because Donald Trump is I just fired up the New York Times to see what the latest is. U.S. officials say they are closing in on an arrangement to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. I've seen versions of that 3-4 times a day for a month or more, and the Ayatollah booth is still there, and they're still shutting it down and collecting things. And it speaks to the whole challenges of doing anything with this administration, because Dom LeBlanc made it clear, nothing is clear with these guys.
Well, I mean, we're living in a world where a couple of months ago, I believe the headlines were, well, if you don't close this, if you're closing the strait, we're going to close it more. Like,
Right.
you know, it's talking about threading a needle on communications. Like, it is a very difficult situation to understand. You know, there's every time you sort of start to see signs that maybe there's going to be a peace deal or some kind of ceasefire deal, it all seems to fall apart. And so until it actually happens, maybe until like a month after it happens, nobody's going to actually believe that situation is going to calm down. For Canada, I mean, we're not really involved directly in that, but it is opening up opportunities for Canada. The Indian trade mission that was here this week, one thing that India wants from Canada is energy. And that the deal we made with Europe this week with Germany, the LNG off of the West Coast, all of those are sort of more lucrative now to Canada because we can be seen as sort of a stable supplier of energy. Those are maybe things that were interesting 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, whenever the war actually began, maybe 3 months ago now. There are lots. There's a stronger case for them now. And you're hearing places like India talking about investing in Canada in energy in ways that they probably weren't as strong about even 3-4 months ago. So Canada is acting to take advantage of that situation at the same time as it's kind of just letting America just wait it out.
Right. And so, Aaron, you know, to your point, you look at these things and how they're happening. You can see it all sort of coming together that, okay, India is interested because of the disruption in the Strait. That can increase production and economic activity and deepen trade partnerships there, making Canada more resilient but also wealthier, so a better customer and maybe a better supplier for the United States. But when all we hear is rupture, elbows up, this sort of thing, that's when all of that sort of gets lost.
Yeah, and I think there's probably some value in saying to Americans, look, yes, we do believe we're up, but that doesn't mean we're not trading with the United States anymore and we're building a wall across the 49th parallel. Yeah. There's probably some value in making that point to Americans, because as we talk about, you know, the communications challenges, I imagine the message getting to Americans is probably pretty negative coming out of Canada right now. And so there's probably some value in just making that point to Americans. But to go back to the original, you know, discussion, it's a communications challenge because, you know, I was on Blue Sky this afternoon, and maybe that's a particular audience, but people seeing the Prime Minister saying "Make America Great Again" were a bit befuddled. And that's the challenge, I think, is going to be to, you know, and we're going to see this especially when it comes down to the CUSMA negotiations, is the Prime Minister is going to want to make some kind of deal, and there are going to have to be some kind of concessions. And bringing that back to the Canadian audience that has been thinking Canada strong and elbows up is going to be a challenge.
I think we've seen this from the Prime Minister a little bit before, though, even early on, when he would go down to the White House and sit in the Oval Office with the President and seem sort of very congenial and sort of nodding and not really sort of being very strong or argumentative at all in that kind of scenario, but then coming back and campaigning on elbows up and, you know, we are going to do all of these things. Like, I think he understands that dealing with the U.S. President is sort of one particular side of his job. Everyone else sees everything. The U.S. president doesn't necessarily see some of what he's saying. He's saying for a domestic audience.
Well, look, the other big challenge the Prime Minister has to deal with right now is what is happening in Alberta, JD. And Danielle Smith has to deal with it too, because she says she's a federalist. The party president said they're going to be neutral because just so many of their members are separatists and want to leave. Then she said, no, I speak for the party. I say what the party position is. And now they've issued a statement saying we have been and always will be a federalist party. I mean, as Mark Carney's trying to stabilize things with the world, you have this disruption and what's happening in Quebec potentially with that election. I mean, how does all of that just undermine what the bigger national play is?
Well, I'll just quote Brian Mulroney, who said that the Prime Minister has three main responsibilities. Keep the country together, so national unity. Make sure that the economy is growing, and also maintain good relationship with the United States. On those three fronts, Mr. Carney is very busy, and will get busy.
Yes, he is. That's an understatement, I think.
And he will get busy on the national unity. In Alberta, what I see from a Quebec perspective is a total mess.
That means the same thing in English and in French, right? Okay,
Yes, it
yeah, just
does.
checking. Yeah.
Because, look, in Quebec, it's, not holding a referendum is done in a very organized way. A party demands a mandate from the electorate to hold a referendum. That did not happen in Alberta. Madame Smith just pulled out this idea from her cowboy hat and then decided to ask that questions in October. She did not get a mandate from the voters on that issue, and that's something that Mr. Carney pointed out on Monday, calling into question the legitimacy of her endeavor. Now, and the other thing is that Madame Smith has been complaining that previous laws to fight climate change has undermined investors' confidence in the Albertan economy. Well, what is she doing by trying to hold a referendum on the future of that province within Canada? She is fueling uncertainty, which will not convince investors to invest in building a pipeline. But it is, I think, in my view, and discussions with Liberal folks here in Ottawa, I'm more worried about the situation in Alberta than in Quebec because it's very disorganized the way it's done in Alberta.
Well, and it's volatile, Aaron, in Alberta, and we've seen this. I'm not saying it's not significant in Quebec, but we've seen it in Quebec, and there's different circumstances, and when it's fomenting there. We're kind of, as the rest of Canada, as we refer to non-Alberta now, coming to this, it's novel, it's new. Like, not the sentiment, but the process is new.
Yeah, the process is new, and to JD's point, like, it's not what the opposition. It's not going to be like that in Alberta. We're going to have, it seems like, multiple Remain campaigns. We're going to have the Premier campaigning, or at least being on the side of United Canada. I think it remains to be seen how much she'll campaign. And so I don't know how that's going to all sort of organize itself. I think it makes for a pretty volatile and unpredictable campaign. But then I think the kerfuffle this week in the UCP also speaks to what does the Alberta political landscape look like after this referendum? What happens to the UCP? Is this, as Jason Markusoff wrote, like, is this really going to be a thing where the referendum gets called? If the Leave side loses decisively, it melts away and Alberta politics reverts to some kind of normal left-right spectrum? Or does the whole thing fracture? Is there a real separatist party coming out of that? That, I think, is obviously the question for right now is what happens in that referendum. The question for after, I think, is where does Alberta politics
It could run on the same timelines because, Mitch Sylvester-Mia is out trying to get a special meeting this summer to force out Danielle Smith as leader. And, the polling would suggest a big surge for the New Democrats. So Smith, as I was joking earlier, could be setting the stage for a sovereign Alberta inside of United Canada under a Premier Nenshi if she's not careful. Right?
Yeah, I mean, the situation being volatile isn't just about the referendum. It's, in some ways, Danielle Smith is partly doing this because she is fighting for her political life in a party where there is a significant proportion of people who want this, who want to have this vote, who want to have this argument. But I think I said this last week. She kind of opened the door to this herself. She's the one who opened the door to a referendum, and she is now wearing the sort of maybe the negative outcomes of that. And it doesn't sound to me from what some of the things she has said that she either understands that or is willing to admit that, at least at this point.
Yeah, and one key question will be voter turnout during this exercise. This is a critical element.
Where it's not binding, too, so to speak,
But, what will be the appetite for voters for this exercise remains to be seen. And also, the foreign interference from Washington. I don't rule out, Donald Trump promising to build a pipeline that would link Alberta to the United States if they vote yes in that question for a referendum on separation. So we've seen comments in the past from U.S. members of the U.S. administration, Scott Bessent, exactly, the son of Donald Trump. I've seen him on big time proposing Alberta to join the United States. So there is an appetite down south for an Alberta becoming the 51st state. And I wouldn't rule out the fact that they would try to interfere and influence what's going on in Canada on that front.
I'm not sure I'm just also not sure that the federal government has figured out its place here. The senior minister from Alberta, Eleanor Olszewski, was asked today, are you going to be leading this charge. And essentially their answer was, well, we're all going to go there and say stay in Canada. Like it does not seem super organized that the federal government knows what they're going to do, and they have to figure that out too.
Well, look, Wab Kinew has his message figured out. Corey Hogan has his message figured out. So you are seeing strong voices there, but where it goes, I'm not sure. But we have a federalist premier putting separatism on the ballot. It's not the normal playbook. We're out of time. Aaron Weary, J.D. Bellavance, and Mia Rapson, thank you all so much. I am David Cochran. Thank you all for watching Power.